Honest J. Nowak. Oh yeah. A pleasure to meet y'all at last, and welcome back to HJN. And now, today, it's a pretty good time for me to go ahead and start getting back into some more historical things out there, because right now I would like to simply focus on a couple other things out there, but first of all, if there's one specific part of the timeline that I would like to highlight really quickly, then here on HGN, it's about time that I pretty much got into the Victorian era. And if you're not very familiar with it, then well, let's just learn a little bit about history, right? The Victorian era was a long period of time, ranging during the 19th century and into the beginning of the 20th century. It ran for nearly 80 years, as far to our knowledge. But historically, the Victorian era was a pretty big deal, because after all, it was not only the time where America was really starting to really flourish within culture, but it would also be the time where worldwide cultures were also going to start evolving. The 19th century would probably be most recognized for things like the invention of the cotton gin, the steamboats, as well as the introduction of some metalloids that would be used in most construction. Not to mention, the Victorian era would also become one of the last periods in time to where we'd be able to say we didn't have much ways of travel. Because of course, it was during that time, in 1886, that the introduction of the automobile pretty much debuted with Mercedes-Benz, unveiling their first ever model that was functional and had a lot of simplistic ways of going through, yet it was a complicated way of starting up. And on top of all that, its performance was so primitive that you wouldn't even get it. The 1886 Mercedes-Benz car was pretty much just, wow, it was a great vehicle for its time, and it certainly gave us a lot of insight on what the future of automotive engineering would be like. Though I should also highlight the story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by author Robert Louis Stevenson. It became a huge hit, and of course we were able to get a few feature films based on that story within the next century. That book itself was a huge selling point. And not to mention, there was also Jules Verne, but still, Jules Verne and Robert Louis Stevenson, and a bunch of their stories told during the 19th century. But if there's one true memorable piece of American history that we will recognize from that era, it'd be the Wild West, of course. If you played such games like Red Dead Redemption and any other Wild West themed games of all sorts, then well, you'd probably get the idea. It was a big deal. American culture was not only evolving because, well, the nation had been over 100 years old during that time, in the last quarter of the 1800s is pretty much just that in and of itself. But getting on through to the 20th century, if you're not familiar with the original plotline of how the Red Dead Redemption franchise goes down, then well, simply put, Red Dead Redemption, quote, takes place towards the very end of the Victorian era, the very first time through the 1900s, where duels were starting to get banned, and American citizenship was starting to evolve, and the governmental democracy was really starting to show for itself. But you know, I guess there's been a long, long time coming to what we have for today. But technological advancements of all sorts, whether or not you trust or not on this, the Victorian era had a lot going for it. The entire world was really, really going through a lot of advancements and a lot of other events that have taken place. So that's pretty much just where I ended here. But if you want to see more, go down to my channel. Make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.